everyone, welcome to the Immortality Podcast. I'm your host, Jake, here with Josh. Today we have a very nice raw pu'er tea from Gua Feng Zhai village in the southeastern province of Yunnan, right along the border with Laos. Yeah, let's get it fired up. So, I always like to preheat everything first. All the vessels, the gaiwan, the fairness pitcher, and the cups, just run a little hot water through them. Kind of helps wake everything up, get everything prepared. You can load the tea in there, really nice, big, attractive leaves. We'll rinse this one. So throw out the first steep.
You know, for normal pu'er drinkers, I think it's people know how to use the tea, but for me, I found that pu'ers were like this advanced level of gaiwan tea drinking. And so why do you kind of do a quick rinse? Is it just because it's an aged tea, you don't know what's on it, or?
Partially that. You do it with younger pu'ers too. If you can see, these leaves are pretty twisted and pressed. So the first steep isn't going to have a lot unless you throw it out, right? You want to wake it up a little with some hot water.
It smells really good. Cedar and some type of fruit.
Yeah, this one's super fruity. So history of this particular cake, that is, this is from 2015, and it's been about 5 years in Guangzhou, which is fairly humid storage. Obviously, the more humid the storage for a pu'er, the faster it's gonna, like, quote, age, which just means, like, the faster the more it will ferment. Fermentation is like what is supposed to happen to raw pu'ers over time that gives it like the more developed woodsy, oaky, earthy flavors.
That is nice. Where are the main kind of pu'er production centers, or are there a couple key regions where people know that the pu'er production is just really high quality tea?
Sure. So I guess just to like zoom out a little, all pu'er has to come from Yunnan. It's a regional definition, just like champagne. I may have mentioned that in the past, but if it's not from Yunnan, then it's not pu'er, it's something else. Yunnan, of course, is also the biological birthplace of tea. So it's the only place in the world that there's actually native wild tea plants still growing. And so historically, actually, Yiwu was the center of distribution. Yiwu is the area that this tea is from. What was called like the 6 famous tea mountains regions. And Yiwu was the big distribution center for pu'er. Currently, it's moved a little. The larger factories are in Munghai, which is just a little to the west of Yiwu.
I feel like you can steep these teas for a very long time.
You can, yeah. Well, there's just a lot going on in them, right? Like I mentioned, these are old wild leaves. So there's a lot of nutrients from the environment that go into this. There's a big difference between a tea plant that was grown in a field with like 1,000 other identical tea plants close together in lines, and then a tea plant growing in something that's like more akin to its indigenous environment, surrounded by other kinds of plants, different flora and fauna, not crammed next to other tea plants competing for it for soil nutrients.
So in a way, this is almost like free-range pu'er.
Yeah, it's free range. It's free range.
or wild harvested.
Wild harvested, yeah.
Which I think is important because most people when they drink tea, they're drinking it out of a tea bag, and then you're getting only certain types of teas. And I think with these teas, they really are looking at tea as something that's medicinal and something that can really help improve kind of your daily life as well as your weekly and your monthly kind of regiments of health. I mean, with these Pu'ers, I end up using these a lot to stay up and work on different creative things. Like I'll edit video with a Pu'er, I'll read on a Pu'er, and then if I drink too much, I have to go for a walk because there's like a dog inside of me that needs to go for a walk. But the Pu'er seems to bring all that out.
Well, I don't want to make any like wild health claims or anything, but I just drink tea because I like it. I mean, I have to imagine that like tea like this, like wild, organic, from like very, very old trees is like probably one of the healthiest things you could drink. So yeah, we can see the leaves are starting to open up a little, which is what I was referring to earlier. They're like in their dry state, they're very like pressed and tight. So the more the surface area of the leaf increases, the stronger the brew is going to be, at least into a point. So what are we tasting in this? What do you think?
Yeah, the oak is starting to come out. Like on those first one or two steeps, it was cedary.
Yeah.
Is camphor a word? Or would this one be tasting camphor? Or no, this is not the camphor.
It might be starting to get there. Yeah, that's something that's like thrown around. If no one knows what like camphor refers to, it's a common pu'er taste, particularly for older pu'ers. It's kind of like, if you never smelled it, it's a little akin to like citronella. There's like a little bit of an herbal woodsy taste. I think this one's starting to get a hint of that, but like probably like 5 or 10 more years out for like a truly like aged profile like that. This one is middle aged. It's actually fairly far along for being like only about 6 years old.
Is it apricot? Am I tasting some type of fruit? But
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. It's almost, I want to say like very peachy, but not peachy. Like almost like the peach aftertaste.
I think dry fruit, like dried peach, dried apricot.
Yeah, that's a much better description of it. Definitely the dried apricot is coming through.
Yeah. So this one probably tasted like 5 years ago. I would imagine that it tasted more like fresh fruit, grass, hay, that kind of thing, and now it's moved towards more sugary, dried out fruit, and then with more oaky and mushroom notes than grass and hay notes.
How old are these leaves, do you think?
You mean the trees?
Yeah, the trees that produce these leaves.
It's hard to say. This one is what's called gushu, so ancient tree. And there's not like a standard for that. It's not like there's like a board that oversees those claims, so they get thrown around a bit. But generally, it's supposed to refer to trees that are at least 100 years old. But definitely big, wild trees. And, unfortunately, there's no way to date trees unless, like, you take like a core drill. Otherwise, it's basically just the tea farmer knows that, like, well, his pappy harvested this tea, and his pappy harvested that tea.
And then grandma harvested it before that.
Yeah.
And then grandpa and grandma harvested the tea before that.
So it's, and these are like small villages, you have to understand. Like Pu'ers only really come into prominence in the last or I should say like wild Gushu Pu'ers only really come into prominence in the last like 20 or 30 years. Honestly, it's a miracle that so many old tea trees have survived, because in the 50s, a lot were cut down, but during the Cultural Revolution, because of like the whole drive towards modernism, the reasoning was that like monoculture tea fields, like factory farms, were like kind of better. Now there's more of an appreciation for the smaller batch, hand-picked artisanal teas such as this.
I think it's amazing that there are these trees that produce these tea leaves, and these tea leaves have outlived Mao.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times these political regimes, whether it's, in the West or in the East, start to do stuff with how the culture produces some of their kind of iconic I guess, products or just iconic foods and like drinks. And to me, tea is one of these iconic drinks that I think people drink it, but they don't really know how far it goes. And that sometimes I wonder if people knew that they could drink tea from a tree that's over 100 or 200 or 300 years old. I think they would shift, other things in their life, So
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with the Pu'ers and sometimes, go really deep into
Well,
that.
you really can taste a difference. It's amazing. Like if I put this next to like, what's called like a field tea, that which is like the monocultures I was talking about, like tea bushes in a row as opposed to like one big tea tree standing in the middle of the forest. You taste a big difference. The flavor is not as deep, and the energy is not as good.
And I mean, even just speaking to that, within a forest, you've got all this stuff happening in the soil that has been eliminated from those kind of monocrop, kind of field produced teas. And so in a way, you're really tasting more of that soil network, the microbes, the kind of complex root systems with like multiple species kind of contributing to the health of the tree, really.
Yeah. It's just a fact, right? It's like any plant is healthier when it has a more diverse growing environment, and it's not as crowded.
I can definitely feel the energy coming off of this one because normally I ask, "What steeping are we on? What cup are we on?"
Dude, I don't know.
Like
if anyone wants to leave a comment down below about what cup we're on right now,
please help us because we are on the front lines of getting extremely.
I want to say 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's definitely somewhere in there.
Let's see. Yeah, so I mean, we're not even really opened all the way as far as the tea leaves go. Like, they're starting to get there, but like there's twisted. That one looks nice. We can kind of start seeing these nice big leaves, stems. Ooh, that's a nice one, nice big one. And they've kind of browned a little from age. Like that's the other thing. Like there's 2 big things to consider with pu'er, like artisanal pu'er like this. It's the age of the tree and the age of the leaves themselves, these particular leaves. Pu'er came like more into prominence in around like the 1970s, actually via Taiwan. There was a big pu'er collection scene in like Taiwan, but now it's become a big Chinese cultural. It's become considered a cultural treasure in China, and it's given a lot more respect than it was like during the Cultural Revolution. Yeah, now the farmers make a lot more money for their product.
How was Trident Tea and Cafe able to find this farmer?
We just have a guy in Yunnan who his family lives and works in Gua Feng Zhai, which is another really famous sought after destination, means high mountain village. But by and large, what we get from him is more like the commodity grade stuff, like the dai, the factory ripes and stuff. He does a lot of really nice specialty stuff too, though. But you just build the relationship, right? Like you order from the same person for years and years. You talk, you give feedback, you ask questions.
And then I think what's really interesting about Trident Teas is that there's actually a really good test forum, which is the cafe. And because, there's a cafe and a bookstore connected to Trident Teas, there's always turnover and selling of the teas to see what people like. But then there's also kind of a regular supply chain that you're establishing.
Exactly.
Whereas sometimes when I look at tea, I wonder if the person even has a tea shop. Are they just kind of the middlemen for, decent teas, or the middle women for decent teas? But they're not really necessarily, going to the full brick and mortar. And then I think when you have a brick and mortar, you actually are bringing tea to the people. And then you're not just selling it online, so your consumer base is a lot more
That's true.
confident, and they believe in you, and there's loyalty.
Yeah.
And then
It goes back to building relationships. It goes both ways. You build a relationship with suppliers, but you also build a relationship with your customers, which is very valuable.
So if people are watching and listening, to this episode with the Gua Feng Zhai, how would you recommend this tea to somebody?
This is a pretty high level tea. Like this is very, very good. Like you might not want to get this as like your first specialty tea ever, but for someone who's into Pu'er and into Pu'er regions, particularly Iwu, I think this is just a fantastically just a fantastic tea. The base material is very good, and the aging, the amount of aging that's on it is also very good. A lot of people misage their Pu'er, especially in the West. Finding this in like a Western facing outlet is like quite rare. We sell this for $150 for a 200-gram cake, which if you're not in the know sounds like a lot, but if you are, probably sounds like a bargain. It's just what the world of specialty tea is. So it's kind of akin to, I don't know, buying like maybe like $100 bottle of scotch, I would say. Like you wouldn't do that if it's like your first bottle ever. But if you've had a few and you know you like it and you're kind of on the track of like what kinds of scotches that you do like, then yeah, then maybe you like spring for the big one just to see. And if you like it, then you buy it again and save it for special occasions.
And then this one, you guys do sell in smaller quantities, but it's...
Yeah, we can sell it by the ounce, definitely. There's not a lot of this one left right now, so anyone watching this might want to check if you're interested. TridentCafes.com/tea. We may be able to get more in the future. It's a bit of an open question. You know, a lot of it, I think the guy still has a lot more in China, but we would have to import it again.
So this is a really, really kind of special episode, I guess, because we're kind of steeping the tea unicorn here, and we might not have enough to even sell.
A very special episode of ImmortaliTea podcast.
Yes, the unicorn of teas is what we are drinking.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or one of the many unicorns of teas, because there's so many tea unicorns.
Yeah, I know. No, this one, if you're interested, I would recommend jumping on it.
Where can people find this tea and then other teas like this Gua Feng Zhai?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, it's available online, tridentcafe.com/teas. This one we don't have in the cafe just to drink out of pots. It's a little more, it's a little above that, I would say.
So then does that mean all of the super high-end teas on Trident's website are basically only available online?
Some of them don't make it to the cafe because we want to either hang on to them for, you know, sales or to age, you know, and we want to make sure they get to someone who's like really going to appreciate it. I would say most of our teas are available in the cafe. Not all of them make it there eventually, especially the higher end ones that are more in demand.
I definitely bought a cake of this and I drank through it really fast.
Yeah, dude.
I think 1 month I drank the whole cake. And
yeah, but what a month.
That month was fantastic.
We've also started offering a tea club. So that's also just under tridentcafe.com/teas. We'll send you about 4 teas with like 3 or 4 steepings along with information and brewing parameters for the tea. You get a free little guy one like this for signing up. A good way to kind of get your feet wet in the specialty tea world. And if you want this tea, of course, get it while supplies last. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Again, I'm your host, Jake, here with Josh. We just sessioned some Gua Feng Zhai raw Pu'er. Now we are tea drunk. So, good drinking, everyone.
See everyone later.